Welcome back once again to the Russell Brown Show, and this second in a series of tutorials on the day with no sky. Yes, in our last presentation we showed you an ethical way to use the existing pixels within an image to recover the sky. In this particular project, I'm going to use a bit more creative license to adjust the sky by merely replacing it. We're going to end up with something that looks like this. And if you're watching carefully, you'll also notice that I've placed a small photograph of the waterfall here within the cell phone. Well, that is definitely creative. So let's get this project started. Let's throw away these two layers that I created by selecting them and throwing them here in the trash. Then I'm going to reveal to you the second image here that I have open of some clouds that I photographed on the same day in the same location in Iceland. Now it strikes me that if I photograph these on the same day, I can use them in the same project. So let's get started first by selecting this, Command A on the Macintosh, Control A on the PC, and of course up to the Edit menu and copy it. Then let's go over here to our second image here, our waterfall image. And I'm merely and simply going to select the sky. In fact, I'm going to use the Magic Wand tool. Let's just make it really simple. Select the Magic Wand tool. Notice that my tolerance is set to about 28. Now, I of course set that earlier because I found by adjusting it and then clicking in the sky, I could easily and quickly select all of the values within the sky. It is moving a little bit here into the waterfall, but we're going to correct that. And to do that, I'm going to select the Q key from my keyboard, the letter Q, to go into the quick mask mode. Then of course selecting the paintbrush tool, I can go in, target in on this area, and actually paint with 100% black into the quick mask and cover up this section of the waterfall that I did not want as part of my selection. Let's zoom back out by double clicking on the hand tool and see if there are any other problems that I see. That looks pretty good. Now again, with the Q key from my keyboard, and for those of you who want to know, you can also move here to the tool palette and select this icon to edit in quick mask mode, and you can toggle back and forth. That was for those who needed to know. Now that I have a selection, what's the easiest and quickest way to get something into that selection? Why, it's the Paste Into command. Since I have something in my clipboard, of course, which we copied earlier from this image, I'm now going to paste it into this selection. Now, of course, these two images are exactly the same size, so it's going to pin register right into position. If they were different sizes, you may have to adjust them once you've placed them into this pasted region. So from the Edit menu down to Paste Into. So it's going to use the current selection as a mask for the entire image. If you cast your eyes over here to our Layers palette, you notice there is a mask that is set up over here. And if I hold down the Option key and click on this mask, we can actually see it. And of course, that would be the Alt key on the PC. So again, with the Option or Alt key, clicking on the mask reveals it or hides it. Now we're not quite done. This is a little bit extreme for this particular day. It's an overcast day, and this is a bright blue sky, and there are of course no shadows in this image, so this does not look very realistic. So with the image layer targeted, layer number 1, I'm going to go up here to the opacity slider within the Layers palette, click and hold here, and then scrub to the left. Wait for it to update on the screen, and then you can see the values change. So quickly and easily I can come in and bring in detail at the level and opacity that I'm looking for. Now I think I can go to a value of around 40%, and it still looks pretty realistic. You will have to make your own judgment on what is realistic for your particular situation. Now, another technique I might use is to actually go in and target the actual mask by selecting it here in the Layers palette. And I might go in and blur the mask or soften the mask in some cases because it may be too sharp. Let's zoom in here on this waterfall region and take a look at it. The mask is not so bad. I'm looking for any stair-stepping or pixels that might show up along this edge, and it doesn't look too bad, so I may not have to go in and adjust the mask. Let's double click on the hand tool again so I can see my entire image. Okay, our sky is in place and it looks pretty good. But this project had an additional creative technique. I placed a photograph of the waterfall into the cell phone. To do that, I'm going to go up here and select my marquee tool and click and drag over the area of the waterfall, about the same proportions and size of the cell phone view window, just like that. Now, since I have a multi-layered document, I don't want to simply do a copy. I want to go up to the Edit menu and do a copy merged. I want to capture the clouds in the background as well as the background image itself. So I select Copy Merged. So I now have all of that information into my clipboard. Next, I'm going to zoom in on the cell phone. Clicking and dragging here, right in on the cell phone, I'm going to select my lasso tool over here in my tool palette. Then moving into position, what I want to do is click and select this area of the cell phone. To do that, I'm going to hold down my Option key on the Macintosh or my Alt key on the PC, and of course, clicking on each of these corners gives me a preview of where my next line will be drawn, because I get to see it with this polygonal tool which forms when I hold down the Option or Alt key. So there I have my selection. Now this selection had a feather of 1 pixel. That may or may not be perfect for this project. We may soften that in a minute. Now remember, we have a copy of the waterfall in our clipboard. Again, as we did before, let's go to the Edit menu and select Paste Into. So we're going to paste the waterfall into this small window. Now the waterfall is really quite large here. We need to make it a bit smaller. So over here in the Layers palette, I make sure I have the waterfall targeted here. Then select my Move tool here in the tool palette. And since I have Show Transform Controls on here in my Options bar, I can simply and easily adjust the size of this. Now I'm going to zoom back out a bit so I can see all of my control points. I'm going to click here in the base, hold down my Shift key and my Option or Alt key so that it constrains the size of the waterfall and it will adjust it to the center. There we can see the waterfall start to appear in the image. You can determine what focal length of lens you have on your cell phone at this time, if we could actually do that. And then we stop. We hit the Enter key to resolve it down to that size. And now let's zoom in a bit so we can see this. And there is our picture in our cell phone. The edge looks pretty good. I'm not going to bother with that. Looks pretty good for this particular project. Let's double click on the hand tool, and now we can see our finished results. The cell phone looks a little bit too obvious and a little bit too bright, so I'm going to reduce the opacity by targeting the cell phone layer with our image in it and running our opacity down in the similar way that we ran our opacity down a bit for our sky. And there we have it. So here is the final unethical but creative technique for putting a sky back into a sky that may not have existed. And in some cases, you may not have pixels in your sky, and you would have to bring some detail back in from another photograph. And then, in addition to that, we learned about pasting objects into a selection. Be sure and use this technique the next time you run across a day with no sky.